Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we're going to be talking about North Korea, which is actually kind of weird because when it comes to like the news kind of videos that we make here on the channel and stuff, I really don't think that we've made that many, if really any, videos talking about North Korea because it's actually been years since this kind of situation has unfolded, which is what's even more peculiar about this whole situation to me. It seems like it's coming completely out of nowhere to just jump out of the woodworks and just surprise everybody. I don't really know if I can even say that it surprises everybody. I feel like most of us who kind of keep up with trending events and like global news, at least for a while now, have kind of, known that this was potentially going to happen again. So basically, every few years, North Korea comes around and they do the same thing, and it gets the entire world all worked up. They start, preparing to test a nuclear explosion. They start posturing and threatening a bunch of people, particularly like the US and South Korea, about using a nuclear weapon and stuff. They start, releasing a bunch of propaganda in their country. They test their nuclear bomb or whatever, it goes over, and a few months later, you just kind of stop hearing about it. It is a pretty common thing for stuff like this to happen. I think the last time that North Korea tested a nuke was back in 2017 at this point. But if you didn't know, North Korea is apparently about to test a nuclear bomb anytime in the next few days, weeks, we don't really know, but it looks like a nuclear test from the Hermit Kingdom is imminent. And of course, the world is kind of already preeminently responding to this entire thing. So right now, North Korea is actually in a pretty bad situation. Their economy's not doing the best. They're also dealing with a massive outbreak of COVID-19, which they actually notably were one of the only, if not the only country on the planet that really wasn't affected by COVID in the first place. Obviously, being such an isolationist country, they didn't really have like open borders with that many countries or anything, or people traveling in and out of the country. So COVID never really was that big of a concern. I think they had like a few cases and whatnot, but it kind of came and went. It definitely wasn't like anything here in the West or like in really any country around the world where there were thousands, if not millions of cases, bunches of people dying and everything. But unfortunately, recently, COVID-19 has kind of struck the country pretty hard. There's been a pretty massive wave of it that's went through. So right now, North Korea is actually dealing with a lot of problems, but they seem pretty intent on doing another nuclear test, which has kind of provoked responses from South Korea, the United States, and other countries as well. So the United States and its Asian allies flew dozens of fighter jets over waters surrounding the Korean peninsula on Tuesday in a show of force as their diplomats discussed a coordinated response to a possibly imminent North Korean nuclear test. The flights came as U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman traveled to Seoul for discussions with South Korea and Japanese officials on the gathering North Korean threat and warned of a, quote, swift and forceful counter-response if the North proceeds with a nuclear test explosion, which would be its first in nearly 5 years. If staged, the test could be another leap forward in North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's goal of building an arsenal that could viably threaten regional U.S. allies and the American homeland. That would escalate a pressure campaign aimed at forcing the United States to accept North Korea as a nuclear power and negotiating economic and security concessions from a position of strength. While the Biden administration has vowed to push for additional international sanctions if North Korea conducts a nuclear test, prospects for robust punitive measures are unclear because of divisions between permanent United Nations Security Council members. So to kind of explain it in layman's terms, the United States and its allies have had this massive decades-long standoff with the North. North Korea is very intent on obtaining nuclear weapons, basically because they see it as their best way of guaranteeing their survival. They see the United States, South Korea, and their allies as kind of like existential threats. They feel like eventually, it's going to come to where we butt heads and there's going to be a pretty big war between the two of us. And they want to make sure that if in any event, really, that there is a war that breaks out or there's any sort of situation between the United States and its allies and North Korea, that North Korea could do its best to actually defend itself. Now, on the counter of it, you got the United States and its allies, which see North Korea as a growing threat to global security. And of course, as national security issues would have it, the United States doesn't want another one of its enemy nations having access to nuclear weapons. North Korea can use the threat of nuclear deterrence to deter the United States and its allies from taking any sort of action that the country would see as problematic, and also, they've used their nuclear weapons as bargaining chips to negotiate things with the West in the past. So obviously, nuclear weapons are extremely important to the North Korean dictator and his country. As of right now, we do believe that North Korea has a small arsenal of nuclear weapons. We're not 100% sure what their technology looks like in terms of deliverance, aka could North Korea launch a nuclear missile from their country and actually strike the US homeland? We don't necessarily know. It doesn't really look that way as of now, at least to a very credible and sustainable level, but after this potential nuclear test, you really never know what could end up happening, man. I mean, North Korea is a very unpredictable country. They've done a lot of very unpredictable things. Now, when it comes to outright nuclear war between, you know, the West and North Korea, do I think that's going to happen? Probably not anytime soon. More or less, what it really looks like from North Korea is their threat of getting nuclear weapons is pretty much just that. It's a threat. I think we all know that North Korea is smart enough to not want to launch a nuclear weapon against the United States. I mean, we have literally thousands of nuclear weapons. We have the strongest military on the planet. We have the largest economy on the planet as of now. It's just not something you want to do, right? Like, messing with the US in that way is essentially guaranteeing your death, you know? And obviously, I don't think North Korea is necessarily suicidal. I just think they want to posture as something that they really aren't, so that they have more bargaining chips at the negotiation table and everything, and of course to guarantee their own, you know, national survival and whatnot. But at the end of the day, man, what exactly comes next? Do we see this tomorrow? Do we see this? What happens, right? What does the United States do? Well, they've already said that they are going to push for additional international sanctions. If you did not know, there's been widespread sanctions put in place against North Korea for previous nuclear tests and previous threats and stuff that they've made and done. But the United States and its allies would pretty much guaranteed try to kick it up even further if there is another nuclear test. Quote, any nuclear test would be in complete violation of UN Security Council resolutions. There would be a swift and forceful response to such a test, Sherman said after meeting with South Korean Vice Foreign Minister Cho Hyun-dong. I believe is how you say that. We continue to urge Pyongyang to cease its destabilizing and provocative activities and choose the path of diplomacy. Sherman and Cho are planning a three-way meeting with Japanese Vice Foreign Minister Mori Takeo on Wednesday over the North Korean nuclear issue. Extending the country's joint displays of military might, 4 U.S. F-16 fighter jets flew in formation with 16 South Korean planes, including F-35A stealth fighters over waters off South Korea's eastern coast, an exercise aimed at demonstrating an ability to quickly respond to North Korean provocations, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said. The United States and Japan conducted a separate drill involving 6 aircraft, 4 Japanese F-15 fighters and 2 American F-16s above waters above the Korean peninsula in Japan, Japan's defense ministry said. The flights came a day after U.S. and South Korean forces fired 8 surface-to-surface missiles into South Korea's eastern waters to match a weekend missile display by North Korea, which fired the same number of weapons from multiple locations Sunday in what was likely its biggest single-day testing event. North Korea has conducted 18 rounds of missile launches in 2022 alone, including its first demonstrations of intercontinental ballistic missiles since 2017, exploiting a favorable environment to push forward weapons development with the Security Council effectively paralyzed over Russia's war on Ukraine. So basically at this point, from North Korea's perspective, right, they see the West and pretty much the entire world as being hyper-focused on what's happening in Ukraine. They feel like this is a good time to kind of sneak in some of that weapons development to kind of try and sneak their way towards the nuke a little bit more. But obviously, the United States is also watching them. I don't know if they think that, you know, the U.S. is so hyper-fixated on the war in Ukraine that they weren't going to notice this, but obviously the U.S. sees everything happening in the Pacific and in Asia as it's really standing now with like the whole Taiwan and China thing too. You already kind of see Asia and the entire region around there already being focused on by the United States anyway, because in reality that's where a lot of the threats to our personal national security come from anyway, with China and North Korea and whatnot. So obviously they were going to kind of pick up on this, they were going to catch this. I don't know if that's kind of what North Korea intended, but any day now we could see a nuclear test from North Korea, and when we do see that, we will have to wait and see what the United States and its allies do to respond to the situation. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel, follow me over on Twitter and Facebook at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shoptimus down below, and until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, well, talking about North Korea, and signing out.